Okay, so this unit is on the quadratic formula. It is in quadratics. We use the quadratic formula when we are trying to find solutions to quadratic equations. Okay, solutions about if I throw a ball up in the air, when is it going to hit the ground, or how far out is it going to hit the ground? Okay, so the quadratic formula can be used for anything as long as it's in the quadratic, it's in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? It can be used on the quadratic, in any quadratic function when other methods may not work. Now it has to be a quadratic function, which means it has to have x squared, okay? And it can just have x squared to use the quadratic formula. All right, it doesn't have to have the b and it doesn't have to have the c, but it does have to have ax squared. So this is the quadratic formula, okay? Some teachers in Algebra 2 will give it to you, some teachers will not. The state test for Algebra 1 does give it to you on the formula sheet, but it is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and that is all over 2 times a. All right, so one of the things we're going to talk about is the discriminant and how useful it is. The discriminant can help you tell what kind of solutions you're going to have. So it can kind of help you decide if your answer is right. The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac, so the stuff that is inside the radical. Not taking the square root of it, but just the stuff that's inside the radical. If your answer of the discriminant is negative, then your solution is not a real number. If the answer of the discriminant is 0, then there's only one solution. If the answer to the discriminant is greater than 0, there are 2 solutions. So that's kind of how the discriminant helps you out. And when you're solving using the quadratic formula, you have to solve the discriminant first anyway. So when you're having to solve the discriminant first anyway, you automatically know how many solutions that you are supposed to have. Okay, so let's talk about the discriminant. Here it is, b squared minus 4ac. So these 3 examples are not in your notes. I'm just showing you how the discriminant works. So here's a problem. 2x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. So in order to find the discriminant, I first need to write down what a, b, and c are. All the variables, I need to write down what they are so I can plug them in. So a is 2, because remember this is ax squared. B is negative 3, because this is plus bx. And c is negative 10. Remember, the negative goes with the number that it is in front of. I understand it's plus bx, but that's a negative 3. So b is negative 3, c is negative 10. All right, so as you can see, I rewrote the discriminant, okay, so that I can plug everything in underneath. If you plug in, use parentheses, just like I have. So for b, I put negative 3, and I put parentheses around it. For a, it's 2. For c in the formula, it's negative 10. And all you have to do is put this in your calculator. Okay, the parentheses will help your calculator solve it correctly. So make sure you use parentheses. Well, when I put in my calculator, I got 89. Well, since 89 is greater than 0, I know there are going to be 2 solutions for this problem. Okay, example 2. X squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. So in this one, a is 1 because there's a 1 in front of x squared. B is negative 6. C is 9. Okay, again, we have b squared minus 4ac. And again, as you can see, everywhere I had to plug in for a variable, I put a parenthesis. All right, when I plug it into my calculator, I get 0. Since it is 0, there's only one solution. Okay, and you'll see that later when we actually use the quadratic formula. All right, last one, g of x. Remember, g of x is function notation. It can also be y, and that can also be 0 for our purposes here. X squared minus 8x plus 20. Okay, again, there's nothing in front of the x squared, so that's 1. B is negative 8, and c is 20. So again, I plug in the negative 8 with parentheses, the 1, and the 20. This time I get a negative 16. since I got a negative number, there is no real solution. You'll talk about how to deal with these when you get to Algebra 2, okay? And you will actually be solving these when you get to Algebra 2. But our purposes here are just to make you understand the quadratic formula. Okay, here's the quadratic formula again. Step 1, write down the formula. It's easier if you write down the formula with each problem. That way you have something right there to go back and look at. Make sure it is in standard form. It has to be set up like this, equal to 0 or equal to y or equal to function notation f of x or g of x. Okay, next write down the numbers that are in place of your variables. Make it easier to plug in if you write them down first so that you don't plug something in that you shouldn't. All right. Plug the numbers into the quadratic formula, use parentheses, solve the discriminant first. There it is, okay, because it's going to tell us how many solutions we're going to have. Take the square root if possible. Sometimes you can't take the square root of what is of the discriminant, okay? We'll talk about that when we get to one. Set up two equations. If you notice, this says plus minus, so you're going to equation that has a positive sign and one with a negative sign, and then simplify. Some of them you will be able to do this. Okay, problem number 1. X squared minus 6x plus 4 equals 0. As you notice, I wrote step 1 here. Step 1 is to write down my formula. So you should be writing down your formula on the paper right now. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Step 2, put it in standard form. Well, this is already in standard form. ax squared plus bx plus c. Step 3, write down my a, my b, and my c. A is 1 because there's nothing in front of the x squared. B is negative 6. C is 4. Okay? So, as you notice, I have my quadratic formula right here, and underneath it is where I plugged everything in so I can keep track of everything. So, the formula has a negative, but 6 is also negative. So, you're going to have a double negative here. Make sure you're aware that you will sometimes have a double negative. Plus or minus. Next thing I'm going to draw is my radical. Okay? All right, here's my discriminant. B squared minus 4ac, so negative 6. Inside parentheses for b squared for b. 1 for a, 4 for c. All over 2 times a, and a is 1. So that's step 4, plugging everything in. Step 5, the discriminant. If I plug into my calculator, parentheses, negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4, I get 20. Okay? So now we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 20. So since I got 20, that means I'm going to have 2 solutions. Okay? Divided by 2a. The next thing, number 6, is can I take the square root of 20? And I can't. Okay? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't take the square root of the discriminant, but I can't on this one. So I'm just rewriting it right here. I just rewrote it. Okay? Number 7, split them up. So here is where it's negative 6 plus square root of 20. And here's where it is negative 6 minus the square root of 20. Always need to split them up. You will have 2 answers. Okay? Sometimes there's only one solution, but even those you can split up. Okay? Next is to simplify. Well, negative 6 becomes 6 plus the square root of 20 divided by 2 times 1 is 2. Again, negative 6 becomes positive 6 minus the square root of 20 divided by 2. I cannot add 6 and the square root of 20 together. Okay, they are not like terms. All right, so these are my solutions. That's it. All right, sometimes you need to approximate. All you have to do is plug it into your calculator. Plug in 6 plus square root of 20 and hit enter, and then divide by 2. Then do 6 minus square root of 20, hit enter, divide by 2. You can also do this on your phone calculator. Okay, example number 2. Okay, all right, so I have x squared minus 11 equals 4x. All right, so step 1, wrote down my quadratic formula, so you need to go ahead and write that down. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Step 2, well, as you can see, this is not in standard form. The 4x is on the wrong side. So in order to move the 4x from the right side to the left side with everything else, I need to use my equality property. So I'm going to use the subtraction of equality property. Since it's a positive 4x, I'm going to use a negative 4x so that it goes away and put it on the other side. So now I have x squared minus 4x equals minus 11 equals 0. Okay? Step 3, write down your A, B, C. A equals 1. B is negative 4 because we moved it over where it was supposed to be. And C is negative 11. Okay, step 4, plug everything in. All right, again, we have negative, and then B is negative 4, so negative 4 goes in there. I put negative 4 with the B for the B squared. There's a 1 where the A goes, and negative 11 where C goes. If you'll notice, everything else stays the same. There's still a negative 4 in between. Okay, and then on the bottom, it's 2 times A, which is 1. All right, step 5 is to solve the discriminant. Well, negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 11 is 60. 60 is greater than 0, so I'm going to have 2 solutions. Okay, so I already know that. I already expect to have 2 solutions. Step 6, can you take the square root of 60? No, you cannot. Okay, and if you don't know whether or not you can take the square root of something in your calculator, hit the square root button and put the number in there, and it will tell you whether or not you can take the square root of it. Okay, so I'm just going to rewrite it since I can't take the square root of it. Okay, now I'm going to split it up into 2 different equations, one where you have the plus, one where you have the minus, because remember, we have 2 solutions. Okay, last I'm going to simplify. A negative negative 4 becomes a positive 4. 2 times 1 becomes 2. Again, negative negative 4 becomes positive 4. 2 times 1 becomes 2. So these are your solutions. And again, remember, you cannot add a whole number and a radical together. They just stay this way. If you need to approximate, again, you can put it in your calculator, and these are my approximate solutions. And I call them approximate because these solutions are irrational, okay? So your decimal keeps going and going and going and going and going forever and ever and ever. So they're an approximate solution. Example number 3. 2x squared plus 5x plus 4 equals 0. Again, step 1, I wrote down my quadratic formula. Step 2, is this in standard form? Are your ax squared, your bx, and your c in order on the same side of the equal sign? They are. Okay? So now I need to write everything down. Well, this time, in front of my x squared, I have a 2. So a is 2 this time instead of 1. No big deal. B is 5. C is 4. So again, we're going to plug everything in. Since B is 5, the positive 5 goes in there. Positive 5 for this B. 2 for A, 4 for C, and again right here, 2 for A. Okay? So everything looks the same. All I did was change B, A, and C. Okay? If you want to, each time you do this, you can set up a format. Here's your format. Let me rewrite that down here. X equals negative, and then just do a parenthesis, plus or minus. So all I'm doing is I am not writing down the variables. Instead, I am just putting parentheses where the variables are. That's it. That's all I'm doing. Every time that there's a variable, I'm just doing a parenthesis instead. That way it helps me when I'm plugging in my numbers. So that might be something that you want to do if you're having trouble with this. Okay? All right, so I need to simplify the discriminant. So I'm going to put in my calculator 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times 4, and I get -7. So, got -7. There is no real solution because the discriminant is negative. Again, you'll learn how to take care of this when you are in Algebra 2. But for now, this is no real solution for Algebra 1. Example 4. Look at this. We have a negative in front of x squared. It's not negative ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. It is ax squared. A has to be positive. Okay? Well, one of the ways we can change it is to divide out a -1. The other way, if you want to, you can add everything. So plus x squared plus 12x plus 20. Okay? All to the other side. Okay? So x squared plus 12x plus 20. So cancel, cancel, cancel. And so now it is that. Or you can say, hey, there's a negative up front. It's in standard form. All I need to do is change all of the signs. And that should be 20, not 18. Okay? That's all I need to do. Change the signs. Okay? So don't be worried about the negative up front. You're just basically changing the signs. Okay? So now, since I've changed my signs, my A is a +1, my B is a +12, and my C is a +20. Okay? Next step is to plug everything in. Again, if you want to, you can go ahead and write down the formula, and instead of putting the variables there, go ahead and put parentheses in the place. It might help you when you're trying to put things into locations. The formula is the same thing every time. The only thing it changes is what numbers go in for the variables. So I have -b, and b is 12. B squared, and b is 12. 4 times 1 times 20, because this is 4 times a times c. And on the bottom, I have 2 times 1, which takes the place of 2 times a. Okay? Step 5. Take care of the discriminant. Well, when I do 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 20, I get 64. Since 64 is greater than 2 or greater than 0, there are 2 solutions. Okay? So now I'm going to have 2 answers at the bottom. Well, guess what? I can actually take the square root of 64. Okay? Remember, when you take the square root of the number, if you'll notice, square root of 64, there is no longer a radical there. If you take the square root of a number, do not write the radical back down. So now I have -12 plus or minus 8 divided by 2 times 1. I still have to do 2 equations because I have a plus minus here. So it's going to be -12 plus 8 divided by 2 times 1. -12 minus 8 divided by 2 times 1. -12 plus 8 is -4. 2 times 1 is 2. We actually get an integer as an answer this time, and an integer over here as an answer. This should be -20. So this should actually be -10. Sorry about that. Okay. So this time we get integers as answers. Integers are whole numbers with negative and positive signs in front of them. Okay? Before we were getting irrational numbers because we had square root. You're going to get both types of answers. Because I got these types of answers, I actually could have factored this if I wanted to. But some people prefer to go ahead and use the quadratic formula because it is the same thing every time. Okay? But just be aware, if you can take the square root of it, it is no longer inside the radical, and you have to take it outside the radical. Number 5, x squared plus 11x equals 0. Step 1, write down my formula. It is in standard form. It is missing c. That's okay. I told you before in the beginning, it is okay to be missing your bx and your c, okay? So since I'm missing c, I do have to put something in its place. It's just going to be 0, okay? If I were missing b, I'd use 0. If I were missing a, it wouldn't be quadratic, okay? So a is 1, b is 11. All right, so I'm going to plug everything in like I've done before. 11 in the place of b, 1 in the place of my a's, and 0 in the place of c. Just as we've done before. Just because it's 0 doesn't mean we're going to do anything different. Okay, now I need to find my discriminant. And my discriminant is negative 120, or is positive 121, which means there are 2 solutions. Okay? So next, can you take the square root of 121? Why, yes, you can. It's 11. And remember, I take the square root of it, no more radical. If I can't take the square root of it, there would still be a radical. Okay? Next, still going to set up in 2 equations. One where it's the plus and one where there's the minus in the middle. So negative 11 plus 11 is 0. 2 times 1 is 2. 0 divided by 2 is 0. Please get this right. Put it in your calculator if you need to. Negative 11 minus 11 is negative 22. 2 times 1 is 2. So my answer is negative 11. I have 2 solutions. This is a solution. Okay? Just because it's 0, that doesn't mean no solution. You have 0 on the coordinate grid. It is a solution. Okay? Number 6. All right, so again, I've written down my quadratic formula. Make sure you get that written down. 4x squared plus 9 equals 12x. I have a problem because everything is not together. It needs to all be on the same side. So what I'm going to do again is use my property of equality, my subtraction property of equality, and 12x minus 12x is going to give me 0, okay? And the 12x is going to go right after the 4x squared, so that it's ax squared plus bx plus c. Right, next we're going to write down our a, b, and c. A this time is 4, b is negative 12, and c is 9. Again, I'm going to plug my b in. If you'll notice, I put negative 12 inside the parentheses for b. A is 4 in both of those places. C is 9. All right, next, we are going to take care of our discriminant. Negative 12 squared. Make sure when you put this in the calculator, you use parentheses. If you don't, it's going to give you a wrong answer. That's why I have parentheses around everything. If you put it in your calculator correctly, you're going to get 0, which means there is only one solution. Okay? One solution. And contrary to popular belief, you can take the square root of 0. It is 0, because 0 times 0 is 0. So you can take the square root of 0. Here it is, outside of the radical, because I took the square root of it. Okay? Again, go ahead just for your own peace of mind and split it up into 2 equations. One where there's a plus 0, one where there's a minus 0. I know you're only going to have one solution, and we'll get to where you'll see it is one solution. But just for you, put it in there and plug it into your calculator, okay? Because negative 12 plus 0 is 12. Negative 12 minus 0 is still 12. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 4 is 8. And you need to simplify it. My answer is not 12 over 8. My answer is 3 over 2. So I only have one answer, and it is x equals 3 over 2. That is the only place that the parabola hits the x-axis is 3 over 2. Okay? So one solution, and it's going to happen when you have a 0 inside of the parenthesis, of the radical for your discriminant, okay? Also, this is one of those that you could solve by factoring, okay? But some people find that this is a whole lot easier, but you can solve it by factoring. Okay, we are going to do one more, okay? We'll do one of your extra practice items. Let's pick number 5. And again, I'm going to give you the answers to the extra practice items so that you can practice. But we're just going to do one of these because I had all the answers already written down. And while I'm working it out, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to try to figure it out, okay? So x squared plus 4x plus 17 equals 8 minus 2x. Step 1, write down the quadratic formula. So over here, I hope I can fit it, or I might do it negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? Step 2. All right? Step 2 means it needs to be in standard form. Is this in standard form? And if not, how do I move everything? It looks like my x squared is positive and it's on the left, so I want to move everything to the left. Okay? So in order to do that, I need to do the opposite of what they are on the right. So since this is positive 8, I'm going to use a negative 8. Since this is a negative 2x, I'm going to use a positive 2x. I'm going to put the negative 8 under the 17 because they're like terms. The positive 2x under the 4x because they are also like terms. So I get x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. Okay? So I'm going to give you just a minute to catch up. Okay, next I'm going to write down A, B, and C. So I'm going to write A equals, B equals, C equals here. And I'm going to give you a few seconds just to write down what you think A, B, and C are, and then I'll write them down. Okay, I have A is 1, B is 6, C is 9. Okay, next thing you're going to do is plug everything in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write out my shell for my formula. And I want you to go ahead and fill in the shell. I'm going to give you a few seconds, or you can pause the video and fill in the shell, okay, to so that you can go ahead and set it up. So go ahead and do that. Okay, so 6 goes here, 6 goes here, 1, 9, 1. Okay? All right, the next thing I'm going to do is just solve for the discriminant. So I'm going to write everything else down. Okay? And go ahead and solve for the discriminant and write down what you get. Plug it in your calculator just as it is. So when you plug in your calculator, you should have gotten 0. Okay? So the next question is, can you take the square root of 0? If you don't remember if you can take the square root of something or not, please put it in your calculator. Okay? Don't not try to put it in your calculator and think that you automatically know it. Put it in your calculator because you can take the square root of 0. It is 0. Okay? Next, we're going to still set up two equations. One where it's negative 6 plus the 0 divided by 2 times 1. And one where it is negative 6 minus the 0 divided by 2 times 1. Just like I do on every other problem. Okay? And the reason we're going ahead and doing this, even though there's only one solution, is because it's just practice to make sure all the problems you work, you do the same thing and you remember what steps to do on each problem. Okay? So negative 6 plus 0 is negative 6. 2 times 1 is 2. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So there's one of my solutions. Negative 6 minus 0, if you put it in your calculator, you still get negative 6. 2 times 1 is again 2. And I still get negative 3. So the only place that this graph crosses the x-axis is at the point negative 3. It's negative 3, 0 on the x-axis. Okay? So, again, I'll do the rest of these problems, work them out all the way, and after you work them out, you can go back and check your work.